Facilitation time for domestic passengers in Nigeria will now be about 90 minutes compared to the previous 3 hours as announced by the airport authorities. And this is owing to feedback from the few days of operations. As local air travel opens up across the country, passengers are expressing satisfaction with the airport COVID-19 protocols. One analyst worries about the sustainability of the process. Plus, airlines in the United Kingdom look forward to better operations as the 14-day quarantine is removed. This and more is what we have on the program. A warm welcome to Aviation this week on Channels Television. I'm Bukola Joe Oketumbi.
Nearly all countries across the globe now have their borders reopened, and airlines are once again back in business. From Nigeria to Dubai in the United Arab Emirates, the United Kingdom to Australia, travelers and tourists are keen to travel by air in the new normal, but with a lot of caution as the COVID-19 pandemic persists. Taking off in Britain, Gatwick Airport is hopeful that passenger numbers will begin to increase as quarantine measures for those traveling to the United Kingdom from around 70 countries and overseas territories, including France and Italy, no longer apply from July 10. UK airports, including Gatwick, have imposed safety measures such as perspex screens, mandatory mask wearing, and hand sanitizer stations and hand washing facilities to stop the spread of the virus. But authorities believe flights are likely to remain far below usual levels.
Well, I think in common with the rest of the aviation industry, COVID-19 has really had a big impact on our airport during the months of April, May and June. But as of today, we're starting to see passengers be able to travel to 75% of the destinations that they'd normally want to travel to from Gatwick, and know that when they come back to the UK, that they're quarantine free.
Concentrating on some key routes is also important at this time.
Well, certainly COVID's had a big impact on us over the last few months. What we're now hoping to do is to stimulate the market with the airlines, and particularly with the quarantine-free arrangement for passengers coming back from the European resorts. So what we're going to do and what our airlines are going to do is to really focus on the popular European destinations, and hopefully that will see the airport grow as we go through into August time. But we'll be running at about 40 or 50% of the normal volumes that we'd see at this time of year.
Australian travellers are rejoicing as Queensland opens its borders to other states and territories except Victoria. Travellers are being allowed into the state without undergoing a mandatory 2-week quarantine for the first time in 15 weeks. While some Australians queued for hours in their vehicles to get into the state, others opted to fly.
I've been in Wagga Wagga for the past couple of weeks. It's taken me 3.5 weeks, 4 weeks to get home now. So it's not been too bad, but it's good that we didn't have to quarantine when we get back.
Oh, we're going to Port Douglas, so we're following the sun, you know, always follow the sun, you know, so yeah, should be fun. I mean, like, it's the first time in months that I live in Sydney, and yeah, should be a blast, man, I think, you know, a little bit like get away from the stress and from all the hectic media, news, daily life, you know, like get some freshen up and come back.
In Hong Kong, Cathay Pacific shareholders are voting to accept a $5 billion rescue package from the Hong Kong government as the aviation industry is battered by the coronavirus. Governments around the world have been helping airlines amid a plunge in travel demand and the coronavirus-related travel restrictions. Cathay has grounded most of its planes, flying only cargo and skeleton passenger networks to major destinations such as Beijing, Los Angeles, Singapore, Sydney, Tokyo and Vancouver. The shareholders, including SWA, which holds 45%, Air China, which owns 30%, and Qatar Airways with 10%, plan to participate in the rights issue. Their holdings will fall to 42%, 28%, and 9.4% afterwards. And now to Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. The country has cautiously reopened its tourism industry to international tourists after nearly 4 months of shutdown. Quite a number of international flights are arriving at the Dubai International Airport, although the figure is much less than before the pandemic. The Dubai government is hoping that with improvements in the anti-pandemic efforts, tourism will gradually be brought back on track and realize recovery.
We've also made sure that we've implemented specific standards across every single touch point in Dubai, from hotels to the amusement parks, to restaurants, to retail outlets, and everything else. So that, again, everybody visiting any of these sites in Dubai will be assured and comfortable knowing that they don't need to worry about these things for themselves or for their family.
Back home in Nigeria, a simulated flight between the capital territory Abuja and Kanu aboard Max Air VM1644 had members of the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19, the aviation minister, as well as journalists to assess the state of readiness of the airport. Then a tour of the facility and observations by team members.
I just observed that unlike what I saw in Abuja at the airport, I want to suggest to the minister and the ministry by extension to look at the possibility of increasing more supply of water to the departure point of this airport. We look around the airport, I still want to see more of campaign against the spread of COVID-19.
I must say that I'm impressed because everything that the MD of FAN briefed us when we met with him, he still complied with all those things from the arrival. Now we're here. So from my observation here, they complied with everything available.
The Minister of Aviation then declares the airport safe and ready for operations.
Close until we are safe to open, then we open.
In Owerri, the capital of Imo State in southeast Nigeria, Air Peace aircraft heads out to the Federal Capital Territory. Within the terminal, COVID-19 protocols such as the use of face masks, maintaining social distancing, washing of hands and disinfection of the airport is ongoing. The passengers appear impressed by the COVID-19 protocols.
I'm very, very excited. I'm so happy that the airport is now open. We can go anywhere we want. I'm just very, very excited.
They check your temperature and you sanitize your bag with your hands. And you get in, they check you, and if you look at the floor, they are keeping distance. So you have to maintain the social distance. So, well, the government are really trying for them to keep it up, because if this thing get out of hand, man, many of us, we lost our family and our friends.
The airport authority pleads with passengers to be timely.
The process here is this. When you come in from the car park, we do alternate parking, so that you don't mix, to maintain social distancing. So from the car park, you joined the screening tent, which is outside. We didn't have issue of passenger waiting on the queue, and we didn't have any issue of passenger saying I have stayed too long. The facilitation was very speedy and it was very clear to everybody. I don't think there's a passenger that even stayed more than 1 hour.
From the Imo Airport in the southeast to neighboring rivers, where the Port Harcourt International Airport received its first flight after months of closure. In Lagos, passengers take to the new normal, observing the social distancing rules at the Murtala Mohammed Airport. Temperature checks and hand sanitizing are necessary before entry. Then to the check-in counter, where there is no close human contact. And now the aircraft lifts out of Lagos.
As you know, during the whole procedure to restart flights, we mapped out everything that will be done in the passenger process, right from booking to checking in to getting on board. So all those procedures were followed, trying to minimize contacts. At check-in, all the crew and staff had the full PPE gowns for cabin crew, masks as I'm wearing, hand gloves for the people that have to collect things from people. Security checks were done using the wand, so there was no contact. So I think that is taking care of a lot of the thing we had. In fact, we had some passengers that turned up with face shields but no masks. And our procedure requires everybody to wear masks. So we have masks available for passengers to use if required.
Within the terminal also, little businesses are obviously taking advantage of the resumption, as the authorities say it's safe to operate.
Well, it's encouraging for now. You know, the pandemic is still out, and the government is trying to bend the curve, and the people are still apprehensive. I think on a daily basis we'll get to experience passenger growth, because definitely it will affect the economy, and then the growth will begin to come up. And if we don't do it, there are many people that have been tied down in a particular place for about 3 months. And since the roads are also closed, they've been in a place whereby they are not expected to be.
At the domestic terminal, passengers also defy the rain to make their journey.
FAN and other relevant agencies have put themselves together to really put a good check for passengers, so that the COVID and things that needs to be in place for passengers have been really checked on and worked on.
The aviation industry is one of the sectors worst hit by the outbreak of COVID-19. The gradual reopening of the sector for business may help to set it on the road to recovery as the battle against COVID-19 continues.
On our interview segment, an aviation analyst, Tayo Juri, shares his experience on board one of the flights as an observer and what he thinks aviation authorities must do to keep passengers in the air at this time. There's more from him.
What's more important for me is the sustainability of this process, to ensure that this is sustained and ensure that the processes are there too. In reality, what I saw on what I heard on board were lots of passengers that were on that flight with me complaining. They were literally complaining that they actually had social distancing in the lounges and the waiting areas and the check-in areas, but on board there were no social distancing. But I believe that's a function of lack of proper education and awareness, because like it's been reiterated at this point, the domestic airlines cannot afford social distancing or missing the middle seats at this point. So what needs to be done is to ensure that passengers and the traveling public educated on the measures that have been put in place, such as the HAPA health filter purification system, such as the PPE enforcement by the staff and the in-flight crew, and as well as the cleaning, sanitization of the aircraft by the airlines. All these processes put in place to ensure that even though the passengers are still seated according to normal seating arrangements on the aircraft, it's still a safe time and a safe process to travel. And aviation is not being a vector to the transmission of COVID-19. The sequencing of flights it would help a great deal, but there are a lot of factors that are underlying in it. We have the rainy season that we're going through at the moment. If a flight hypothetically is sequenced for, is confirmed and scheduled for 7 o'clock, and that sequence due to weather or weather pattern or weather element does not let that flight operate. The next flight, if it's sequenced for 7:30, I will want to leave at my 7:30 slot rather than wait. So there's an ideal of sequencing, and there's a reality of the operational effects of sequencing. So what needs to be done is, what if there is a clog in the wheel? How do we address that? Is being able to look at this process and have a standard operating procedure, which has already been put in place. And with that put in place, is now shifting the process further from the trend and surveys that we've evaluated. We saw that we actually evaluating and we're stating, suggesting that we're going to see the growth in 3 weeks, and thereafter there might be a stale. The stalemate may be due or could be attributed to the apprehension about the passengers traveling. One, the lack of the vaccine, the increase and the spike in the COVID-19 patient. Even the PTF is actually claiming that there's going to be a spike in September.
When Aviation This Week returns, Newsflash is next. Do join us again. Newsflash takes up with the federal government announcing the reduction of arrival time for passengers from 3 hours to 1.5 before departure for domestic flights. Travelers are also advised to check in online and possibly print their boarding passes. The Minister of Aviation said this at the Presidential Task Force briefing on COVID-19 early in the week.
Yes, after the dry run, and having been to Lagos, Kano, and sent our people all over the place, we find out that because we are sequencing the flights, they come in an organized, orderly manner, and they depart. We find out that we're able to go through the protocols and meet our flights when we arrive an hour and a half before our domestic flights. What we said earlier was you arrive 3 hours before. We wanted to err on the side of caution. We wanted to make sure that when you come, you do not congregate, create a bad situation for us and further spread this disease. And should we commence the international, it will still be 3 hours.
Following the refusal of the Nigerian Immigration Service to allow departure to the United Kingdom for 58 medical doctors through the Muritala Mohammed International Airport in Lagos via a chartered flight, NIS authorities have added that the group of doctors did not also have a valid visa waiver or training visa from the Home Office in the United Kingdom, as well as letters of permission to fly during the pandemic owing to border closures.
You will try the left one.
Authorities also add that the private flight had been approved by the Ministry of Aviation for just 42 doctors. Statistics from the NIS show that about 44 of the doctors were between their late 30s and mid-20s. Now to the foreign scene, as Vietnam's most seriously ill COVID-19 patient, a British pilot who at one point seemed close to death, has now left hospital. The case of Stephen Cameron, a pilot for national carrier Vietnam Airlines, became a sensation. Speaking in Vietnamese, Cameron said thank you as he left the hospital, flanked by doctors who had treated him. The 43-year-old Scot, who arrived in the Southeast Asian country from Britain in early March, was hospitalized 3 days after his first flight for the airline, following a visit to a bar in one of the cities that became linked to a cluster of coronavirus cases. Cameron's illness and the highly publicized effort of Vietnam doctors to save him became a symbol as the country spent over $200,000 treating him. Personal devices to transport passengers with limited mobility are rolling out at Tokyo's Haneda Airport. These efforts are necessary for labor shortage hit Japan as this urgency creeps in as the coronavirus outbreak compels social distancing. The initial 3 devices which replace push wheelchairs are from Yokohama startup Wheel. The equipment, which will run between security and passenger gates, come equipped with cameras, LiDAR and other tech to autonomously navigate the environment.
We've actually mapped the whole terminal here, and then we've analyzed the data, and then we feed it into the machine. So the machine will actually have the knowledge of the whole environment, and then using the sensors, it will try to figure out where its current location, and then because we've already included the destination as well, so it's smart enough to think, okay, I need to go there, what's the most ideal route to reach that point.
Wheel aims to expand the number of devices at Haneda and into other airports, with the pandemic giving a boost to the startup.
So in terms of the coronavirus pandemic, actually we designed this without that in mind. But because of this exact pandemic, it actually accelerates our development and also the deployment initiative.
Wheel, whose other co-founders come from tech groups Sony Corp and Olympus Corp, has found a foothold in Japan, where strict regulation has held back the growth of new mobility options like ride-hailing and electric scooters. Finally, Mexico's government is considering a $120 million bid for a luxurious presidential jet after an unidentified prospective buyer offered to pay part in cash and part in medical equipment. President Andrés Obrador has made selling the Boeing 787 Dreamliner of his predecessor, a cornerstone of his campaign for a more frugal government. An official who heads a state-owned development bank involved in the sale told a regular news conference the president had instructed him not to offload the jets and other planes and helicopters on sale for less than their value. Pilots from the Tiger Club in the United Kingdom now benefit from spectacular views of the city and the River Thames. Sections of East London's airspace, normally open to planes taking off from and landing at London City Airport, are now available for the club's use.
Take off into wind. Right.
Anna Walker and her fellow pilots fly one of the club's two 1933 de Havilland Tiger Moth aircraft from an aerodrome in Upminster in the eastern London suburbs.
Normally, the whole of the London airspace around London City Airport and all the other London airports is very congested. But at the moment, there's hardly any traffic around, and so we are allowed to go fly over places we don't normally go to because it's too congested. I think pilots are always looking for a new challenge and a new thrill, and this opportunity of flying over an airport, and it's just another attraction, and it's a beautiful part of London as well. Fly along the Thames barrier, and just looking at the London skyline is just so magic. You can see Wembley from Surrey, and the visibility has been unbelievable. And there's no smog anywhere, and I fly all over the world, all over the country.
The combination of a rare opportunity and perfect condition means the Tiger Club will avail themselves of London open skies for as long as they are allowed. Now to the safety of cabin air as airlines try to convince nervous travelers it's perfectly safe amid efforts to relaunch a grounded travel industry. Many believe that pressurized cabins only contain static or recycled air. In an office building, air is said to be exchanged about 4 times every hour. On a modern jet, it's up to 20 or 30 times. In most cases, compressed air is fed from the clean part of an engine to air conditioning parks. From there, it flows to fans in the cabin ceiling where it's dispersed downwards. Half of that is then recycled through filters designed to remove 99.9% of contaminants. Plane makers insist cabin air is renewed every 2 to 3 minutes. Scientists caution that in reality, air is always a blend, as air currents over short distances are hard to predict. Boeing and Airbus have deployed engineers to examine seat-to-seat airflows to better understand how to reduce the risk of in-flight transmission. This is our final destination on the program. See you next time and keep safe. I'm Bukola Jo Okitumbi.